Thank you to the choir and our praise team. God has really given us great weather now as the summer season rolls. As Elder Helen prayed in her very heartfelt prayer, the summer season has begun, and it's a lot of activity, very busy, a lot of things happening. But I'm so thankful that we get to be here to take a moment of pause and really hear what God has to say to us today. So I invite us all into a deep meditation upon God's word for us. Today's passage is a very short passage, but it's packed with a lot of implication and meaning. If you really look at the word, the passage, there's a word that appears a lot. And I don't know, did anyone catch what this word is that is repeated a lot? If you do know, say it out loud. Yes, I hear that. Welcome, right? Okay, so let's read this portion of the passage. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person, and so on and so forth. How many welcomes do you see there? 6. Good counting, yes. 6 times in a very short passage. So we know that this word was very important for Jesus to welcome, and there's great implication in that. So what does he mean by welcome? You know, when you go to a mall and there's a retail store and you go in, there's someone to greet you. Welcome, right? Is it that kind of welcome? Just a simple, just come on in, right? I think that's a part of the meaning, but I don't think that is a complete meaning of welcome. When Jesus says that, it's more than that. It's more than just a passive acceptance of someone coming in. When Jesus used this word welcome, it's an active verb, an active word, an active receiving of a person. It's an active embracing of that person. It is, in a way, becoming aligned with that person so that what is important to that person becomes important to you. It is aligning yourself so that you become shaped and influenced by that person. That's what it means to be aligned, and that's the meaning that Jesus had when he said, whoever welcomes you welcomes me. Their agenda becomes your agenda. So a very important question for all of us today is, who are you aligned with? Who is it that shapes you and influences you? When we're born, naturally we're born into our families, so it is our family that will shape us the most. That's who we're most aligned to at first. They shape so much of who you are, right? Your personality, your values, the way you think. And then when you go to school, your teachers and your friends and the school environment, they begin to shape who you are. When you go to work, you spend so much time there, so your work peers and colleagues and even the work environment and the culture, all of that starts to shape who you are. The thing is, when you meet Jesus in a real way, there becomes a radical break in who you're aligned to. There's a fundamental change. Because the whole meaning of discipleship is you become aligned now with Jesus, with who he is, what's important to him. His agenda becomes yours. And Jesus says this in the opening of the passage, whoever welcomes you welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. I mean, there's a chain. Whoever welcomes you welcomes Jesus, and whoever welcomes Jesus welcomes God who sent Jesus. So, and who is the you that Jesus is talking about? The you that Jesus is referring to are the disciples of Jesus. So in other words, he's saying, whoever aligns himself with you is basically aligning themselves with me. Now, who are disciples of Jesus? What does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? I mean, there's a lot of possible meanings to it. When I asked the teachers downstairs, it's like being a pupil to an apprentice following a teacher. All those things are very true. But when you read the Gospel of Matthew closely, and I wish there was time to go through a thorough exegesis of Matthew, but when you go through the Gospel of Matthew, his interpretation of everything that Jesus taught about being a disciple boils down to this. Disciple is someone who seeks the will of God with all their heart. Someone who seeks the will of God with their entire being. So before you may have had other agendas, other priorities, but now, once you've met Jesus, the overriding priority is to seek and do and live out the will of God. That becomes the center of your existence, and that is what you align your life with. And so to align yourself with Jesus' disciples is to align yourself with those who are seeking the will of God with all their hearts. And that is what Jesus did too. In the following chapter in Matthew, one day Jesus was out teaching. And then someone came to Jesus and told Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, your mother and your brothers are outside waiting for you." And then Jesus had a very strange response. This is what he said to that person. "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Right? And pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers." What a strange response. What did Jesus mean? Was he disowning his family? This is what he goes on to say. No, that's not it. Oh, did we miss? Oh, did I not? Okay. Well, this is what he said after he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my mother and brother and sister. And let me get clear. Jesus was not disowning his family. I mean, when he was hanging on the cross, in fact, he saw his mother, biological mother, and he saw his beloved disciple and told his beloved disciple, "Take care of her. She is your mother now." So he loved his family. But I think he's making a point here. You can love the people close to you, but who you actually align yourself with and are shaped by is different now. You are shaped by and align yourself with those who seek the will of God. And that is what shapes who you are. So being a disciple of Jesus, it's a radical change in who you align yourself with. So what does it mean to align yourself with those who seek the will of God? So our passage today, it's the tail end of chapter 10 in Matthew. In all of chapter 10, it's the chapter on discipleship, right? Jesus talks all about what disciple. So he starts by sending out his disciples, right? And so Matthew is very concrete. Yes, pursuing the will of God, but Matthew makes it look concrete. I mean, what is it to seek the will of God? We say it in the Lord's Prayer, right? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So you are doing everything you can to make God's will a reality here on earth. So the disciples were sent to first proclaim the good news. Yes, the kingdom of heaven is near. In other words, God is close at hand. It's time to change and prepare yourself and live according to God's will. They were tasked to heal the sick, cure the blind, and raise even life from the dead. These are all things that are will of God. It's very concrete. But in chapter 10, Jesus is also very clear on some of the consequences and implications of living according to the will of God. Jesus talks about opposition that they will face, rejection they will experience. Even their own families will begin to disown them. So being a disciple and following and being aligned with Jesus, there are real life implications and consequences that can arise. And so Jesus is saying, who you align yourself with are these kind of people who pursue the will of God and who also suffer consequences for it. And Jesus goes on to say this: whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. So prophets and righteous person, right? What does it mean to welcome a prophet and righteous person? Who were prophets and righteous people? If you really look in the Bible, prophets, first of all, they were strange people. Very strange people, weird people. You look at John the Baptist, and the description of him is like he had hair like wild camels, wild hair. He had camel's belt, and he ate locusts. And he was just all alone in the desert, just screaming. So he's kind of like a crazy person. That's what prophets often were. But you know why they were so strange and crazy? Somehow they had such an intimate kind of connection with God's heart and God's vision. They saw the world and things through God's eyes. And so they saw what God desired, what God's will was, and they saw the actual reality, and they're so disturbed and bothered by it. It made them crazy. But in that intimacy with God, they could not help but speak the truth of the situation, the truth of the consequences if people don't repent and turn back to God. Now, these kind of truth tellers, do you think people liked them? Not really, right? Think about it in our own setting. When people are pointing out things that are wrong, do we often want to hear them? It's just, I have too much to worry about. Just be quiet, right? Or we tune them out. Yes, prophets too. Initially, people tuned them out. But when they persisted and could not tune them out, they began to exclude them and then marginalize them. And then when they still persisted, they became persecuted and then ultimately even killed. So a lot of prophets ended up dying. That was their fate. And what is a righteous person? A righteous person is not necessarily some just morally upright person. That's not what Jesus means when he talks about righteous person. A righteous person, the Greek word is dikaiosune, a person who seeks right, what is just. So especially when things are wrong, it is someone who tries to do the right thing and who tries to make wrong right. I think we also know, though, when there are those kind of people around you, are they often a pleasant presence? Not really, because they make you feel very uncomfortable sometimes, especially when you're just kind of comfortable with the way things are and just want to just do your own thing. When a righteous person is calling out what is wrong, and when that means you have to make uncomfortable changes, people don't usually like that. So righteous people, too, are often ignored, ridiculed, marginalized, and cast away. So who is Jesus? What is Jesus really saying? When you become a disciple of Jesus, who you align yourself with changes. You now align yourself with what is often the very tiny minority voice. The voice that seeks truth, the voice that seeks the will of God. So there's a radical implication in who we are shaped by, whose agenda becomes our own. That's what discipleship means in terms of who we align ourselves with. So aligning yourself with prophets, with righteous people, with true disciples of Jesus, it's a risky endeavor. There's a great risk to your own popularity. Who you align yourself with matters, right? It's very important. If you're in a company, you have to kind of be aligned with the right manager, right boss if you want to continue to progress, right? In Korean, we call it a line. You have to be in the right line, right? If you're in the right line and that person succeeds, you are going to go all the way to the top with them. It's not only in Korea. I think it's any setting. If you choose the wrong horse, then your career can really be affected, right? But Jesus is basically saying, choose the wrong horse, right? Align yourself with the losing line in some ways, in many ways in the eyes of the world. So it's a risky endeavor. There's a risk to your popularity, to your standing, and sometimes even for your own safety. And we've seen that happen a lot in the course of history. But it's not only the risk that you're taking on. I mean, Jesus also makes a promise, kind of a very great promise in a way. He says, whoever welcomes a prophet will what? Share the prophet's reward. In other words, you yourself don't have to be the prophet, but you're going to share the reward that the prophet gets. And same with the righteous person. You align yourself with them, you will share in their reward. It's almost like you're almost equal. And what is this reward that prophets and the righteous get? Earlier in Matthew, Jesus says these things. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I mean, these words can only encapsulate a little bit of what Jesus is talking about. It's a much deeper reward. It's a reward that most of the world probably cannot really see or taste or touch, but it's a much deeper reward. But I think it's a real reward. It's what makes life worth living for. It's what makes life meaningful. There will be, that song we sang, Abide, is a beautiful song. I forget how the lyrics go, but the last verse, when my life is, in order to find rest, I depend on you. Yes, there will come a time when we all need to account for our life, and we'll have to ask ourselves, did I live a good life? And I think what Jesus is saying, seek the will of God with all your heart right to the end, and it will be a good life. It will not necessarily be the rosiest or easiest path or easiest life, but it will be a good life. I think that's what Jesus means by these rewards. So you align yourself with those who seek the will of God, and it will be a good life. Now, just up to this point, you can see, oh man, how am I ever going to align myself in that way? That's a huge task. But I love Jesus' teaching. There's always good grace involved. This is what he says in the final verse today. Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. A cup of cold water. That is something that any of us can provide. It's not true. There was a time, I think even in our ESM service, when someone used to always put a cup of cold water in the pulpit. Now I get my own. It's all good, right? But a cup of cold water. What Jesus is saying, it doesn't require huge actions. Aligning with those who seek the will of God, it doesn't need heroic things. A simple cup of cold water. Just a little, in other words, a little message that, hey, I see what you're doing. I appreciate it. Thank you. Continue to be encouraged and carry on. That's the message. This past Friday, so I was approached, let's say Tuesday, Wednesday, by someone from a sister church, a London Korean Christian church, and they are running a summer VBS. And I think they like what we're doing here. So he asked if I can just come online. And they were meeting on Friday night. They're having almost like an all-night training. So they asked if I can come on like 9:30 or 10 p.m. And just talk about our summer camp, what we do, why it's important, what makes it successful, and things like that. As Elder Helen prayed, this week, it's just been a crazy week, right? At the end of school, and I hadn't finished writing my sermon yet. We had a 5-hour Sioux Valley training the next day, and it's just a lot. But these people are all volunteers. They're meeting on Friday night. for VBS. And then the one who asked me, he's like this big corporate finance guy, but he's like leading these training these young people to run their VBS. How could I say no? So I had to offer my cup of cold water, my 15 to 30 minutes of time. So I said yes. And so I joined them on Friday, talked a little bit about our summer camp, what we do. And I asked them about themselves. And I mean, it was a blessed time. And afterwards, I was so thankful that I had done it. And it felt really nice. I mean, last night we had our Sioux Valley training, and one of the discussion questions was, how can we maintain our energy during our time there? Because it's intensive 5 days and very tiring, especially for a lot of our young people. And one of the things that was shared, I think actually Jonathan was talking about him and Charlie, they were leading praise, and they noticed when the other person was feeling very tired at some point, so they said, hey, I got you for this. Why don't you rest and let me do this? And then the vice versa happened. I mean, little things like that, that's the cup of cold water. And it gave them encouragement and energy. Right? A cup of cold water. That's what Jesus says we have to do, and that's how we align ourselves. They're not huge actions, but they go a long way. Sometimes living this life, we feel so tired. We feel overwhelmed, and we feel like we have nothing left to give. But when you seek the will of God and pursue it with all of your heart, God creates the capacity for God's will. God gives you the strength to do that. And not only that, God will actually renew your strength through your act of giving cold water. I mean, after talking to the people in London, I was still as busy as ever, and it was 10 o'clock at night. I still had to write a sermon and things like that, but I felt more renewed. I felt more vigor. And I felt new inspiration to carry on. That's the amazing thing that the Spirit does. When you seek God's will, God creates the capacity, and God fills your heart and helps that cup overflow. That is one of the great secrets, spiritual secrets to life. So offer that cup of cold water to those who seek to do God's will. Whether it's at church or in your daily setting, take a look. See who is quietly trying to do the right thing, who is trying to quietly make things better or just serving in a very humble way. Jesus said, whoever offers a cup of cold water to these little ones in the name of a disciple. In other words, he's talking about just people of no status who are trying to do God's will very quietly. But it is incumbent on us just to notice and say, hey, can I offer you a lending hand? Or thank you for what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Okay? Let us get into that practice of doing that, because that practice will change us. It will continue to open our eyes. It will shape our hearts to seek after God's will. It will make you more courageous, too, to align yourself with them and to stand with them. That is one of the missions of our church, to stand with the weak and vulnerable. Living in this way, when all is said and done, we will share in God's reward when He says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Amen.